Evening. We want to welcome our viewers to the Johnson City Information Channel, I believe that's what it is, to tonight's Johnson City Regional Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, March 10th, 2020. At this time, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask for Commissioner Cooper to lead us with our Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer.
Please join me in prayer. Lord, we meet tonight to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, and to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognize that our responsibility to the past and the future and the rights and needs of both individuals and our community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next item up on our agenda will be approval of tonight's agenda. We may have an amendment or adjustment to the agenda.
Do I have any motions? Motion to approve.
Motion to
Approve the agenda.
approve the agenda with the, we have an amendment that's been proposed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we add the
You take away your,
Yeah, I withdraw my
thank you, go ahead.
amendment.
I move that we add the amendment zoning recommendation for 5112 Bobby Hicks Highway and 3309 Sid Martin Road in Gray.
That we remove,
That we add that to our agenda as item number
this is
7.
stewardship annexation as 7, and then move number 7 down to number 8 to discuss the divisions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me try to restate that to make sure I have it correct.
Please
It's
do.
understood. We have a motion to approve tonight's agenda with the exception of moving what is currently item number 7 down to number 8, replacing number 7 with the stewardship annexation request. Fair? Second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Approved. Next item on the agenda will be approval of minutes from the meeting of February 11, 2019.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes. No old business. Seeing no old business, we'll move right on to new business tonight. The first order of new business will be to consider rezoning of the property at the intersection of North State of Franklin and Sunset.
March 2nd. March 2nd, 2020. Yeah. Page 7.
Chairman, Planning Commissioners, before you is a request to consider the rezoning of a piece of property along State of Franklin from RTP, that's Research Technology Park District, to B4 Arterial Business District, and RO2 Medium Density Residential Professional Office District. The piece of property both on the west side of State of Franklin and on the east side. Now, let me point out a couple of things on this piece of property. This is all one parcel. This area marked in red and all of this area is one parcel. However, this section of the property is in the county. It's outside of the corporate limits of Johnson City. So that is not included in this rezoning request. It is outside of our zoning jurisdiction. The other small piece along Sunset Drive is currently zone R2 and it's not included in these rezoning requests. So the only section we are dealing with are the two pieces that immediately flank North State of Franklin on both sides and a section of the railway. These areas are currently zoned ROTP, and they are recommended to be zoned B4 for the western section and RO2 for the eastern section of the property. This is a staff-initiated rezoning, which means there is no plan from a property owner at this time. The future land use map designates this particular corridor for medical uses, basically. And this was done following the MedTech corridor plan that the city had in this area a couple of decades ago. However, staff has noted in its effort to update both the zoning text and the zoning map in the city that this area has undergone significant changes over time, that the ROTP zoning district no longer fits this particular area. For example, in 1998, this piece of property where you currently have Lowe's was zone MX, that is mixed use, and ROTP, the city rezoned that to B4 to permit the Lowe's development and the other businesses we've got at that particular location. In 1996, where we currently have, there is a hotel right here and the Eastman Credit Union Bank, that area was also zone MX. The city rezoned it to B4, Arterial Business District. That was in 96. In 94, you also had this area down the opposite the current Food City. That was all zone I1, light industrial. The city rezoned that to B4 to permit. There's a gas station around here. There is also a hotel that is going on this side right now. It is under construction. That piece of property was zone MS1, Medical Services District, and RO3, Medium Density Residential. In 2015, it was changed to B4, Arterial Business District. And in this area where you have the bank, that was also zone ROTP, and MS1, the city changed that to B4 in 2015. This indicates a significant change in the character of this particular area that responds to market demands and has significantly changed the land use element of this particular area west of State of Franklin. To the east, there have been two significant changes lately. In 2012, this piece of property was zoned Plan Business, BP, and it was rezoned to ROP4, Plan Residential District. At the time, there was a plan to build a multi-family development on that piece of property. That has not happened. This other site where you currently have Food City and all the out parcels where we have the restaurants, that was zone MS1, Medical Services, and in 2013, it was changed to B4. So within the last decade and a half or two, there's been significant changes within this area, responding to economic changes, responding to demands in the market. And that has affected the character of the corridor. It's no longer medical or research as was initially foreseen. It has become arterial business in character. The amendment that staff proposes fits into this trend. Right now, in terms of the zoning district, east of North State of Franklin, northeast, basically this area is all zone B4. And southeast is also zone B4. So what the amendment proposes to do is to extend the B4 zoning district into this entire area and basically feed that up. On the east side, the east side is unique in the sense that it adjoins a single-family residential neighborhood. And as such, in proposing a zoning district for this particular area, we have to ensure land use compatibility with the adjoining single-family residential district, but also being taking cognizance of the fact that that piece of property adjoins State of Franklin. So it's uniquely different from the neighborhood. The neighborhood does not adjoin State of Franklin. And throughout the State of Franklin corridor from downtown right up to Bristol Highway, we don't have single-family developments along this corridor. So it can accommodate multi-family development. It can also accommodate commercial developments that are in line with the character of State of Franklin, but also compatible with the adjoining neighborhood. To ensure that compatibility, we look at our code. Our zoning ordinance is currently written with the different uses that are permitted in different zoning districts. The neighborhood is currently zoned R2. Uses that are in this particular category are generally compatible with each other. Those that are in this category are compatible with each other. And every time that we have a use in this category adjoining another use in this category, that's when you need a buffer, to provide a buffer. So right now that property is zoned on the east side, is zoned ROTP. We are proposing to downzone it, step it down to an RO2 medium density residential district, which will still permit certain commercial uses, but it will also permit single family, multi-family development, which are currently not permitted in the ROTP zoning district, and will be more in character with the adjoining single family residential district. Staff does not propose that that area be zoned B4 because although it adjoins State of Franklin, the kind of uses that can go on there in a B4 zoning district will be too intensive for that site. Also, because of the natural character of the site, it has got some significant sinkholes in that area. From a soil study that was done recently, it's not a piece of property that can take some very, very high intensity commercial development on that site. The neighborhood meeting, staff had a neighborhood meeting yesterday. There were 4 main concerns that were, or issues that were raised at that neighborhood meeting. A lot of them not very much centered on the zoning district itself, but on a development that can go on there, other issues associated with the development that can go on there, such as stormwater management. Something were to go on that side, what is going to happen with issues of stormwater? Those are elements that we handle within the stormwater ordinance of the city, within the context of the stormwater ordinance of the city. And there are TDEC regulations that control that. So if any development were to come in the city, if it's a subdivision, the plat will come before you, preliminary plat will come before you, and the construction plans will be reviewed in accordance with city ordinances that regulate both the quantity, the quality, and the rate of flow of stormwater from that site. There are also concerns about traffic. For example, that you have speeding at this intersection, drivers making a right turn lane at this intersection, the speeding there, and also high traffic volume at this intersection. Staff believes that by actually downzoning this piece of property, we are alleviating that traffic concerns, because with an ROTP zoning district that permits more intensive uses, you could actually have more traffic at that intersection. There were also concerns about the state of Oakdale Drive. If we have a development on this piece of property that is connected to Oakdale Drive, that will not go well with that road. That is a fair concern. Oakdale Drive looks like a small county road, about 16 feet wide. 2 cars can barely bypass each other. There is no requirement that the city must permit any development that goes on that piece of property to have access onto Oakdale Drive. In reviewing every project that comes in, planning, engineering staff, we take into consideration the capacity of any adjoining street to handle whatever development that is proposed before that project can be permitted to connect to that road. And as it is, under these existing conditions, we do not think that a multi-family development or any significant commercial development would have access to that without any significant improvement. An example, think about a Ford dealership on Bristol Highway. When it was initially proposed, it had a driveway on East Mountain View Road. If you go out on that side, there is no driveway on East Mountain View Road. So that's just an example of a development that can come into the city proposing to put traffic in a residential area, and the city has powers to say, no, the street network will not handle the kind of traffic you want to put on that road. There were also proposals on further down zoning. In other words, RO2, the neighborhood thinks that, or some persons within the neighborhood thought that RO2 is still high, let it be further down zone, maybe to just something that will permit just single-family residential development. Staff does not think that that is the best way to go on this particular rezoning. One, because it adjoins State of Franklin, it's uniquely different from the neighborhood in that perspective. And secondly, in changing the zoning of a property, especially when it's not initiated by the property owner, we also need to make sure that we are proposing something that is fair for the value of the property and for any other development in the city. There were also concerns about, at this moment, there is no particular development that has been proposed to go on this side. So what is the trigger? Well, the trigger is really what we do in planning. If we were to wait every now and then until we have a development before we can initiate the rezoning of any area in the city, we will be reactive instead of being proactive. And in planning, we have to be proactive. That is just the way planning works. We have to identify areas in the city that have undergone these changes and then proactively take steps to protect the neighborhood and at the same time to ensure that any development that goes on there will be in line with city infrastructure. In this regard, staff proposes that the west side of the property be rezoned from ROTP to B4, Planned Arterial Business District, and the west side be rezoned from ROTP to RO2, Medium Density Residential Professional Office District.
Couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
What's the name of the road that runs to the east of the eastern portion? It dead ends into Sunset. What's the name of that road?
Oakdale Court.
So staff what's staff predicting the future of that road to be?
It's currently now, let me point out something about this
The
road.
thought was that was going to be a frontage road eventually and connect further along.
No, not Oakdale. This road will eventually, the plan was for this road to be eventually extended down into this piece of property.
In the middle of it, or would it?
It all depends on what the plans, what is built on that site. So it all depends on the plan. You have to look at whatever is proposed, how it is laid out, and then you determine whether it goes down in the middle or it goes to the side. It all depends on what the plans are at
The
that
other
time.
question is, that whole corridor has an overlay. What kind of impact does the overlay have on what could or couldn't get built there?
The overlay will still apply as currently written in the code, which only exempts single and double family residential developments.
Oh, so the overlay exempts,
So currently in the zoning ordinance, all single and double family residential developments are exempted from this is in the design overlay. They are exempted from the design overlay requirements. Every other development, multi-family, commercial, any other development will have to follow the design overlay requirements. So this rezoning, we are only changing the underlying zone. We are not changing the overlay.
I don't quite understand that, so can you explain that just a little further, please?
Okay. The State of Franklin corridor has got two zoning districts. There is an underlying zoning district which basically determines what can go on that piece of property.
okay,
The uses. For example, B4, ROTP, and then you've got the overlay zoning district that really controls elements of development standards, like facade, building facade for any structure you may put
That's
out
why you
there.
have a brick pals.
screening outdoor equipment.
Yeah.
It goes about 300 to 350 feet back away from the side of the road, and it affects how
Single
things are
and
developed.
multifamily homes are exempt.
Are exempt from overlay requirements
understand.
throughout the city.
Yep.
Whether it's corridor overlay, design overlay, gateway overlay, they are exempt.
Yep. All right. So,
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So are there multiple landowners of this, or who owns this? Who currently is?
It's like in a trust.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are three persons in this trust that jointly own it.
The whole parcel that we're
The
talking about?
entire
On both sides?
parcel from here, these, and this is all one large parcel.
There's
What
currently
was-
no plans, sorry.
I was just curious what their thoughts were, the trust's thoughts were on the rezoning when we told them we wanted to rezone it. What did they say?
We've not heard from them. We sent out letters notifying them that we're making this rezoning. We've not had any feedback. Yes, Mr. Stout lives on this piece of property, I was told yesterday.
And we haven't heard anything from them on rezoning their property?
We have not heard anything from him.
That's bizarre.
And we've put our signs on the property. The signs on the property, this is out for rezoning. Sent out letters, we've had no feedback from him.
So the eastern piece of property, well, it's all one big plat, one big parcel?
It's
So
all
we're
one,
split zoning parcels.
it's all one big piece.
So we're
Right.
split, we're going, but if we buy into this, it's, we got what, 3 different zones on one parcel?
This piece is already zone R2, low density residential, directly behind the neighborhood.
R02 can be formed.
And then this is the piece we are recommending be zone R02. And then these B4. This is in the county. It has its own different zoning district in the county.
But it's still owned by the same.
It's owned by the same family, yes.
The property north of the parcel that we're talking about now, which is just down from the surgery center, what is that zone?
It's zone RP4. Just give me a second, let me double confirm this. Yes, it's zone RP4.
And why are we not trying to rezone that too?
To rezone,
The RP4.
why have we not included the RP4 zoning district to this too? The RP4 zoning district is already significantly in conformity with the character of that area. It's a residential zoning district, and it permits some non-residential uses that are comparable with the nature of of a residential area.
So this probably goes above and beyond, and you guys, I think, have probably already gone this far, but have you guys reached out to the family and tried to call them by phone or reach out to their attorneys to notify them? I know you sent a letter and put up signs. I know it's probably beyond the standard protocol, but has anything else been done to reach this family? Or the trust?
We do not have contact numbers for the family. Usually, that's the way we will go is we send out letters informing the property owner and say, we're rezoning this piece of property. If you've got any issues, give us a call and we can have discussions about it. Especially if there is something they're planning to do with the property and they may think that the zoning district you are proposing will not be in line with what they're planning to do, then they will reach out. Yeah. We've not had any feedback in that regard.
Okay. Do we have any further questions for staff?
So we just send them a notice, we don't
We should
solicit
knock
their,
on their door.
we don't
They-
solicit their input or response, it's just, hey, we're getting ready to rezone it.
Let me jump in here just for 1 second.
Absolutely.
So, a couple things based on what I've heard. This rezoning, in addition to the other rezoning, which is the piece up there off of Christian Church Road, next to the DMV site. Those 2 pieces of property are currently zoned RTP. And this is a city-initiated change for both of these sites because we are looking to remove the RTP zoning, which is research technology zoning, from pieces of property that, from a market perspective, most likely will not develop in that form or fashion. And the other is there is purposeful intent behind encouraging and directing research technology development in the area of West Market Street, where Lark Street Extension is being constructed. There is a tremendous amount of conversation with, or not at my level, but conversation at the administration level with the city manager and other folks tied in with Ballot and ETSU regarding development of the research park that is on the 60 acres of land south of West Market Street across State of Franklin from the hospital. So there is a concerted effort there. And so what we want to do is remove the RTP zoning from lands that are encumbered, so to speak, by this current zoning. So the other zoning district, or the other rezoning that Hassan is going to present to you is the one up there that is currently owned by Wellmont, which is the piece up there next to Exit 17. This one in particular happens to be a little bit of a unique situation in that it is, according to Washington County, one parcel. However, the city, are not creating a traditional split zone type situation like you've heard me talk about before, about how we need to repair split zoning, because it is not open field, so to speak, meaning you don't have, if you take this large parcel, you don't have zoning just crossing open field across the parcel. In this particular case, just because you have the same owner and the same tax parcel, you actually have hard edges. You have physical or natural edges. One of those edges is the boundary of the corporate limits. The other is you have a hard edge with the railroad tracks and with State of Franklin, as well as with the edge of this neighborhood. So that's why the recommendation is to split it between a heavier commercial zone here and to downzone it here, to allow for those properties to develop in the future, but to bring into consideration compatibility with the adjoining neighborhood. Now, let's go back to the question regarding the property owner. We have a responsibility, well, it's not just a responsibility, there's a law that we have to follow to notify the property owner of the proposed rezoning. We have to be careful going beyond what the law sets out as our notification requirements, because you then get into staff acting in an arbitrary manner. And so someone could easily say, well, staff tried to call and even drove out and knocked on the front door of this property, but staff did not drive out and knock on the front door of this property over here. So it's dangerous for us to go above and beyond. We need to meet those minimum requirements, and we've met those requirements. The other thing to consider is that you, the city, specifically the city commission, has the authority statutorily to initiate rezonings. So a rezoning does not have to, it's not like an annexation. It does not have to be initiated by the property owner. We are obligated under law to notify the property owner, but you, the local government, have the authority to initiate rezonings. Does that help?
It does, thank you.
Okay, good deal.
We understand that. It's just that it's kind of strange that they wouldn't respond on something like this. So we certainly had the right address. Is there somebody infirmed? Is there a way to try again? Can you use a certified e-letter? Is there something that we could do to make sure that, hey, this is what we thought was appropriate for your land, and we have the authority to do it, but would you like to speak into it? It's just kind of, it's a little disconcerting to not have any input from the property owner.
We can't make them respond, but
No, I
we can
understand that,
confirm that the letters were mailed to the tax addresses that Washington County has on file.
But we can't confirm that they received them.
Correct.
So maybe we aren't meeting our obligation to notify them.
We are meeting it because state law says you send a first-class
And that's all the
letter.
law says, you just send a
Correct.
piece of paper. Okay. So at the end of the day, we are still split zoning the eastern portion of the property.
Now, the eastern portion of the property is just going to be, we recommended that it be zone B4. There's no split zone on the eastern side.
Right-hand side, isn't that
Oh,
east?
thank you. Yes, but you've got, just as Preston mentioned, you've got that hardscape element that separates, which is Ogden Drive in this case, that separates this piece from this piece. It's not all connected as one green field.
This is where the definition of arbitrariness and just good old-fashioned common sense seem to clash. This seems like it'd be really nice if we could go above and beyond to just do the right thing and contact somebody in a different way or verify. And I understand where we're coming from with laws and people talking about that, but wow, that's a real problem. But
If you permit me to something with respect to that, and I think there is some significant legal element about that. If the city commission decided today to rezone all properties in the city of Johnson City, it would go ahead and do it.
And we'd be out of a job.
no, it's not a matter of if you can legally, it's a matter of what's the right thing to do as a human. That's why we're here on the board, to communicate with the people in the community well and represent them. Nobody wants their property rezoned without knowing, generally. I don't know many people who would want that. That's kind of the whole point. We know we have the authority, it's just rude.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think this is just rude. We have sent out the notice
No, I know.
that we're required to send.
I know.
So if we just decided to go ahead and rezone this without sending
know.
out any notice,
You got to understand, from our standpoint, approving rezonings in 6 years, I've never rezoned a property without having the property owner say something or be involved. So,
I think that's a really good point. I mean, okay, I understand, Preston, what you said, but I think we need to go the extra mile and try to reach out, if we can at all, without seriously violating the law. Yeah.
I mean, is that against the law?
I'm sorry?
Is
A
that
registered
against the
letter?
law to send a?
Would that be capricious
I mean,
to send a registered letter?
Would that be in favoritism to this particular situation?
To send a letter?
No, a registered letter, in other words, receipt requested, signature requested.
That way we know somebody got it.
We will have to put it in the zoning code, put it as a city's law that going forward, when we rezoning property, a registered letter has to be sent to the property owners.
Or just said, if nobody responds to the regular letter, then you could send a, registered letter.
Yes, we would need to have that in the zoning code.
It almost seems like we boxed ourselves into behaving poorly because of law. And that's a sad thing. Does any further questions for staff?
And if we're only sending letters, that would be some other thing. I think we had this discussion at the Planning Commission on notices, whether our notices are sufficient or not. And the Planning Commission agreed with staff that the notices we sent out are sufficient. The Planning Commission agreed with staff that we go the extra mile of pinning signs on this property, especially if you have somebody that lives in that particular area, the person is able to see. Every other person in the neighborhood who doesn't receive a letter is able to see.
No, I
We
think we were
have
talking
done-
about
That's two different
distances and
things.
longs. It's different. It's apples and oranges.
That's
We were-
neighbors.
Yeah, we were
We're talking about
talking,
the owner.
and especially when you're dealing with an entity like a trust or people who live out of town. It's not like they're going to see the sign. Different stories.
Song, I hear what you're saying,
Yeah,
I understand the legalities, but I can pretty much predict you're going to get the same kind of conversation if it passes planning commission and goes to the full city commission. That feeling, I think, is still going to come out, and I don't know what the result will be, but I probably guarantee you the same conversation is going to occur.
Common sense meets law. Any further questions for staff?
Preston,
was going to push along with the public hearing if there is any further questions. Did you want to address or speak with us, Mr. Mitchell?
I'm thinking, but. I certainly hope that the board understands that this is, staff is not suggesting or attempting to impact someone's property.
No, come on now, that's not where we're coming from. We're just
Right.
frustrated, excuse me for interrupting.
Sure.
But that's not where we're coming from, I don't think. Where we're coming from is that if any of us owned that piece of property, we'd want to at least know what the city was contemplating. And then, more than likely, we'd say, yeah, that's great. If you think that's going to help the city and it's not going to significantly impact the value of the property, go ahead. But until I know about that, I own the property. I think I should have some say-so.
Sure. Maybe we should do this, and I would rather apply this ask to both of these cases. If we could table both of these cases, and then I'd like to reach out to the city attorney and have a conversation with the city attorney prior to the next meeting, if that would be all right. Because these are city initiated, these are not being initiated by a private developer.
Right.
There is no development proposed on either of these, but I would like to reach out and have that conversation with her. This is not intended to, well, let me just stop there.
I don't think that anybody's turning intent.
Sure.
They're just dealing with this unusual
absolutely.
case that created a quandary. No implication of malice on the city's state of, I understand you're
Staff's-
trying to protect
Right.
communities and plan well. We understand that. I think it's a great idea.
Sure.
Is the other owner represented, though? I think the other
Oh,
owner
valid.
of this property is represented, so would that prevent us from acting on that particular?
It would not.
Christian Church Road, we can
It
still
would not.
list it.
I just, but because both of these are staff initiated, that was my request. But yes, if you would like to keep the other one on the agenda, please feel free.
That's fair.
Do we know that Ballard's aware of the other one?
Well, I would have to ask Hassan.
We'll ask.
Right.
I think there are a number of people here concerning the state of Franklin rezoning, correct? And I'd like to move on to public hearing so we can at least, they've spent their time and hear what they say about it, living next to it. Y'all have spent some time talking with them. We may go ahead and table this tonight, but we'd sure love to hear what you have to say because you live next door. We appreciate your time. Is that fair?
Sure. Absolutely.
Any further questions for staff at this moment? Can we move on to public hearing? No. Let's go ahead and open up public comment regarding this rezoning on State of Franklin and Sunset Drive from RTP to B4 and RO2 here. So please, if whoever would like to speak would approach the bench and give us your name and address. Yes, please. Just come right up to the microphone. Give us your name, address, let us know if you're for or against, what your thoughts are.
I'm Melissa Connor.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm at 1403 Woodside Drive. My home is about 70 feet approximately from the front of that field on Oakdale. And I've lived there my entire life. I represent the neighborhood. We're all in green T-shirts. Cumulatively, there are families here that have lived in that neighborhood for almost 100 years, cumulatively, obviously. So we're very concerned about what happens with that property on, is it the east side? It's the east side. We would like for you to consider, if it does get rezoned, to zone it down to RP3, which is single residence. We certainly would rather not see a multifamily residence go in there or medical office buildings. That's our concern. We're also concerned about traffic. That Oakdale Court, it used to be just a little rock lane that divided the county and the city. There's a lot of traffic on that road now. I can only imagine what it would be going forward if it was developed.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I might suggest that you put a note on Mr. Stout's door. He might call you back if you do that.
The gentleman who owns,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Thank you all for your time. I did invite you via email to drive by. I'm sure you received that. I would welcome, stop in, have a glass of tea. We'll be happy to walk the
Very nice.
property if you'd like to. But we would like for you to see how it might impact our neighborhood and the value of our property.
We thank you for coming and being a part of it. And
Thank you.
organizing. Great job with the shirts. Good job. All right. Anybody else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? Name and address, please, sir.
Yes, my name's Shannon McCool. I live at, over in Town Acres, but I own the office building at 1325 Sunset Drive. So I'm directly opposite where the street dumps out, and I can hardly get out of my office many times during the course of the day because of current traffic flow issues. These were issues that we discussed with the city at the time all of this was actually being done. And unlike, I mean, I'm not a resident out there in that particular neighborhood, but I spend probably 18 hours a day kind of on that corner. And I'm probably the only person here that actually met the original criteria from the standpoint of a med-tech, in that I'm in the drug development business. And I head up a little company called RX Bio Inc., which is a spin out of the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. And we're in the business of developing a radiation countermeasure drug for the Army, the Department of Defense, et cetera. And that's why we don't have a name on the front of our building. We have only 1325. So I would encourage you to pay close attention to what these fine folks have requested that you do from a downzoning point of view. At some point in time, the city is going to be forced to do something at that water's edge abutment coming on to Sunset Drive, because Food City is not completed. There must be at least 4 or 5 other building opportunities there for somebody. I mean, if you want to really see a show, come about Friday afternoon about 4:30 or so, and we can give you tea and take pictures, that sort of thing. So I thank you for your time. The other reason I wanted to talk is because Larry and I are classmates, former classmates, and I don't think he's ever seen me come to a meeting and not say something. So I didn't want to have this be the exception.
As usual, I'm not disappointed.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? No, okay. In light of that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment section at this point and then open up for discussion on the board for options and thoughts.
I move we take Preston's offer to defer this topic until he has a chance to consult with city council, or council, excuse me.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And I will go ahead and call the roll. One other thing I would, say, this is a tough situation, just to speak to the folks who came to understand that we did hear you. This is a tough situation when we zone like this, because if you look out like the 4-lane going all the way out through Piney Flats and areas like this, the state of Franklin is a major arterial road. And it is our job to look at major arterial roads and see what happens as they progress out from it. You don't have a single-family home right on a major arterial road. There's a natural buffer or a progression away from it, and on arterial streets that require some things that occur there. And we listened to staff, what they were talking about is a down zoning. Maybe this isn't the appropriate zone, maybe the owner would like it to go all the way to RP3, but those are some good foods for thoughts. Thank you for bringing specific suggestions. Understanding that, traffic, stormwater are things that the staff deals with in every parcel of land to make sure it meets code, that we do manage stormwater well, that we do manage traffic well. Those things have to be dealt with. So it's not arbitrary in that process. But when you're that close to a major arterial thing, there tends to be a step down that generally happens that's considered appropriate. Just something that kind of is tough to wrap your head around whenever you've lived in an area that's been not developed for so long, and then you begin to see that occur. It happens over time, but that's what happens with a major, split-laned highway right down the way. That's typical sound planning. And it follows not something that's arbitrary, but what we follow is called a land use plan. So we can't just arbitrarily come in and go, we think that's good there. But we actually look at what's been a 10-year land use plan, and oftentimes longer than that, what the plan is for that. So I say that just to sort of answer some of your concerns, not saying how this body would vote for or against it, but I think what we're asking for is more input in potential dialogue, and we appreciate what the city's trying to do, in a large part to protect you, because if actually it was developed RTP right now, it would actually be worse. But just wanted to communicate to that. You spent some time being here tonight, and I wanted to give you a moment of my time. Thank you very much for being here. We can chat with the staff afterwards if there's further questions. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield?
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Chairman Zayance?
Yes.
Motion to defer approved.
Thank you. All right. So let's move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the rezoning the property at the intersection of Boone Station Road and Christian Church Road, from RTP to B4. That's a tough one. Maybe RP3 wouldn't be bad, but I'd have to sit down and look at it. The owner needs to be a part of that.
I'll show you a track next time. Don't fix that.
I said he had fixed it, but he did not. Apologize for that delay. The system really doesn't seem to be working technologically the way we had set it up to operate.
Paper free.
The rezoning before you is also a staff-initiated rezoning for a piece of property at the intersection of Christian Church Road and Boone's Station Road, up in the Boone's Creek corridor area. This piece of property is currently zoned RTP, Research Technology Park, and staff is recommending that it be zoned B4, Arteria Business District. The same information that Preston had provided in terms of foundationally why we're doing this rezoning is apply to this piece of property. There have been two other main changes that have taken place in this corridor that are going to significantly affect not only this property but all other ones that are accessed through Lake Park Drive and even in neighborhood in that particular area. One of it is the I-26 improvement, the exit 17 improvement that is currently going on. Right now, drivers are able to make a left turn lane going in or out on Lake Park Drive. Per the plans of this construction, there will be no left turn lane at that location, which means all traffic will basically and permanently have to go, all left turn traffic coming from Jonesboro, the end of the county, for example, and intending to go to the DMV area or to all this commercial area or whatever business that may be located here, will have to go in through Christian Church Road. There will be no left turn lane on Lake Park Drive. The same thing for anyone doing business in this area. Right now, they can come out on Lake Park Drive, get on Bonus Creek Road, and hit the interstate of this way. That will not be possible any longer. Everybody will have to come in. Under the current setup, we'll have to get on Boone Station Road and come down on Christian Church Road. So Christian Church Road is kind of fixing up to be a very busy street to handle more than what it is currently handling. It is necessary to put in place measures that can decongest traffic on that road. The second element is that this area is currently, there are really no entitlements, it's currently going through the state, but the city has passed the ordinance identifying those pieces of properties that are currently in the economic incentive zone. So something is going to happen in that area. Exactly what it is, we do not know, but we know that there will be significant economic development that will be happening in this particular area. The future land use map designates this piece of property for commercial development. It's currently zone ROTP, permits limited commercial development. Future land use map designates it for commercial development in line with the B4 zoning district. This is conceptual, what staff looked at. Possibility that there could be a street extending from Lake Park Drive and connecting to Christian Church Road that will create a situation in which traffic will not need to get further up into the neighborhood before accessing this particular area. The B4 zoning district, the B5 and the PBs are the only zoning districts that require interconnectivity whenever you have subdivision of property. All other zoning districts do not. So by rezoning these to either a B4, B5 or PP zoning district, staff is recommending B4 because that will be in line with the surrounding zoning district. That will give room for, will require, any future development will be required to create interconnectivity between those lots. There's been significant discussion at the level of the city when TDOT came up with the plans to do the intersection improvement. Public Works Department reached out to TDOT on whether they could do this construction even from here going down straight. TDOT was not open to that. And so we have to look at alternatives that involve the private market. And for that to work, we might have to create the conditions that are necessary for there to be returns on investment. The future land use map and the comprehensive plan has an important policy with respect to how we should act on rezoning issues. Policy 2.1.1 Action 3 says Planning Commission, the city, should support the rezoning of vacant land to or from commercial and industrial uses based on market demand, which is what that economic incentive zone creates in this particular area, on transportation impact. Lake Park Drive, no left turn lanes on Lake Park Drive is going to impact this particular area. It's necessary to provide an alternative on access and compatibility with the surrounding land uses. The area south of this piece of property is all zone B4. It has commercial development which will be compatible with any other commercial uses that may locate on this piece of property in future. And in terms of compatibility, this piece of property also adjoins the county. That is the significant properties outside of the city. These properties, this is in the county, is zone PMD, that's Plant Manufacturing District, which is even more intensive than the B4 zoning district that staff is proposing for this piece in the city. There is also the A1 surrounding it, and A1 zoning district in the county permits commercial development. This piece directly across Boone Station Road is zoned in the county PRBD, that's Planned Residential Business District. So right now it would permit business development on that piece of property. As such, rezoning this property from ROTP to B4 will not permit any development that will be out of character with the surrounding area. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, sir.
We had a neighborhood meeting On Friday last week, nobody from the neighborhood showed up. The property owner, Ballard Health, Hans was here present and has no issues with rezoning these from ROTP to B4. Yes, I also received one email, I had one phone call, I also received an email from the owner of this property. He was concerned, basically asking if by rezoning this piece of property, we're going to open these roads such that people can begin parking on this lot. And I said, no, that's not what is taking place with this rezoning.
I'm sorry, Song, you said this and I don't think I quite understand. How does changing the zoning alleviate the traffic concerns?
It opens up the property for more development possibilities, and this will be, for us to have a street constructed there, this will have to be, we have to bring the private sector on board. And the ROTP zoning district, when this was annexed into the city, it was immediately zoned ROTP. Because at the time, Wellmont had a plan to build this medical complex on this piece of property. That plan it's no longer applicable. The current property owner, Ballard Head, has no intention to pursue that plan. So through zoning, we are creating underlying conditions, favorable conditions for that property to be potentially subdivided. And as such, through that subdivision, any developer, the current property owner, can have any returns on investment on that property.
If with the revised TDOT design, if somebody's traveling east on Boones Creek, can they turn left onto Lake Park?
No,
So they can't turn left out of Lake Park, nor can they turn left into it?
no. So it will all be blocked. If you're going east, you can't. This will be a median. You can't make that left turn.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, thank you so much. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up for public discussion. Anybody here wishing to speak for or against this rezoning?
Thank you. That's fine. Hank Carr, 3326 Bondwood Circle. Thank you for taking a minute tonight. I have represented Ballard Health for about 22 years and helped them with their real estate matters. I did inform the leadership team at Ballard that this was being considered. And I am very familiar with the property. And it is, the staff's initiation here is actually helpful for me. It moves the process forward that I think needs to happen. It's something we've looked at, and we got busy out in Gray looking at working on the Bobby Hicks Highway project, and so we think this is timely, and for us it makes sense. But at this time, they don't have any specific use that they've got planned for it. They're looking at all their options right now.
So
I'll answer any questions.
No issues,
None at all.
with this change.
None at all. The zoning makes sense. I was part of a similar rezoning on the other side of the highway back at kind of the end of the year, approximately a year ago at Boone Ridge Point, and it just seems to make sense here to set this up as B4. It will not be a quote hospital complex. That doesn't seem feasible at all, which was kind of how it got to where it is today.
I know TDOT is not interested in helping with the road or the development of this land to alleviate the traffic problem, which is really one of the issues here. Is there any interest in subdividing this land?
Yeah, so I was kind of listening to the conversation earlier. In my history here, I just had a great experience working with the Public Works Department and the Planning Department. These roads will be required in some form or fashion when this property gets developed. We're going to have to provide, property owners are going to have to provide roadwork solutions. And even the piece of road along State of Franklin, that's all going to have to tie in at some point at the developer's expense. This one's a little bit different because you've got Christian Church Road, and I don't remember the road behind up here, but those roads certainly are going to need some improvements to them at some point. But my experience has been when a property owner shows up to develop a piece of property, that the city generally says, hey, we need you to upgrade, your portion of that road or contribute to it. And those things generally get worked out. When you talk about subdividing the property into a road network, as it was described here, I think that's a very possible scenario. Here's the thing, what you do is you go through a process and you evaluate the land, you evaluate the topography, and you go, okay, where's the best place to put this road? Now, TDOT's original interest was to put it down on kind of the lower, the downhill side up behind the hotel and the storage project that Universal's put in. And you know what? There's some merit to that. It's the path of least resistance. It's the closest route. It would require the city to only make improvements to Christian Church Road up to that point and really kind of help the cost. But look, I don't know that. Here's the thing. My experience has been that TDOT will contribute to roads when there's something in it for them, when there's a reason for the community from a jobs perspective. And I think what I have to do in my role as a professional is, as this property develops, I've got to find uses for it that contribute to the marketplace. And then if we want to get TDOT to help us build a road, we got to deliver some jobs to do that. And my experience has been both the city and TDOT have always been very willing to help out in that scenario, but they aren't going to do it just because you ask them. They're going to do it because you've proven a need. But here's the thing, I think back to the point earlier, the property needs to be zoned correctly, and we need to move on with the development of it as best we can. And I think this is the right scenario in this case. And so there's no issue, no obligation, no issue on the property owner's behalf at this time.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Thank you. I'll step down.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up for discussion and motions on the commission.
Move we approve.
A motion and a second for approval. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield?
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
And Chairman Zions?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda is rezoning of a portion of the property along Boone Station Road from RP2 to R2B.
Madam Commissioners,
Thank you, yes. Go ahead, sorry.
this is a familiar piece of property. It's been before you, I think, about 3 times. And the applicant, the property owner, is requesting that we rezone it just about 950 square feet of this piece of property. Basically, as shown here on the map, this small area. And looking at it this way, it doesn't make any sense. So why are we just rezoning that small piece in the middle of nowhere? It doesn't appear to make any sense. This is the Chestnut Cove subdivision that came before you for annexation. First was this piece annexed into the city and was assigned the R2B zoning district for, I think, about 98 single-family subdivision lots. And then the developer came back and requested that we annex this other piece. So that was the second time it came in front of you. And then the third time was the preliminary plat. So you're familiar with this site.
Yep.
This is the preliminary plat as it was submitted to you and which you approved. What has happened since then is the developer has proposed a change in the preliminary plat. And that change is basically only in this area where you've got the roundabout. The zoning line as currently established is this line, this thick line. So property to the north is zoned RP2, and property to the south is zone RP2, and property to the north is zone R2B. So that's how it's currently zoned. And the zoning line followed this preliminary plat concept. The development south is going to be PUD, planned unit development, and north will be standard subdivision. So the zoning districts followed those different development styles that were proposed by the applicant. What the applicant has proposed to do is to increase the number of standard subdivision lots by 2. And to do that, he is proposing to, in this area, to add 2 more lots by reducing the lot sizes of lot 23, 24, 25, 26, and creating 6 lots in this way. To do that, if we just approve this, lots 25 and 26 will be split zoned, because the zoning district line will go straight across this property, these 2 lots. That is a zoning nightmare, to have single family residential lots split zone in the middle. You will have the kitchen in having one zone and the sleeping room in another zoning district. Setbacks, you don't know what setbacks to apply there. It's just too much confusion. And we based on that, to avoid that confusion, the developer is requesting that we rezone the area on these lot 25 and lot 26, such that the entirety of lot 25 and lot 26 will be in the R2B zoning district. So this is what this is intended to do. The rezoning request falls in line with the future land use map that requires that the area be zoned for residential development. He's proposing residential development in that area. Until the property is actually fully developed and we have a subdivision plat recorded on the map, it may not make any sense. But once we have a plat, final subdivision plat of the property, and construction has begun on the side already, so the subdivision is already being developed, the property line, the zoning line will actually match the lot lines. So it will not be ambiguous at that time. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, sir.
What happens to that lot in the curve, which looks like there's 225s, but does it, at least on that blow up on your right, it calls that open space? Does that, are we literally adding 2 lots or just 1?
You mean this area?
Where is your?
This
all
is
the way to
like-
the- yes, I think.
Yes, that's open space.
Well, it's, on the original plat, it's a lot.
Yeah, he's turning that into this, and we look, there's also a revised preliminary plat. He has adjusted the lot lines, moved lot lines in other areas. That don't affect
So at
that.
the end of the day, we are in fact adding 2 lots.
2 lots, yes.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? Okay. Anybody here wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request?
Alan?
Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and open up for motions and discussion.
If we approve.
A motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Chairman Zayons.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Item number 4 is the revised preliminary plat of Chestnut Cove subdivision, Phase 1.
This is a request to, for the Planning Commission to approve the revised preliminary plat for Chestnut Cove subdivision, the same piece of property you just looked at, basically approving the creation of those 2 additional lots. This is the preliminary plat that was approved, and they're basically adding those 2 lots in that area. And initially, he had excess open space based on a 15% requirement. We've done all the calculations. It currently meets the open space requirement as proposed. The preliminary plat meets all subdivision and zoning ordinance requirements. Staff recommends approval.
Yes, sir, thank you. Have any further discussions or questions for staff? Anybody wishing to speak for or against this plat approval?
And that approval, staff recommends approval subject to the rezoning of that small area that we just
Okay.
recommended.
Nice caveat, thank you. Any motions or discussion?
Motion to approve, subject to the rezoning also being approved.
You second that motion? A motion and a second to approve, subject to the zoning also being approved. Please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart.
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
and Chairman Zayons.
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Motion
you.
approved.
All right. Number 5 item on the agenda is final subdivision replat of Lot 2 of the Judy Harris property along Hairtown Road.
This is a request to approve the final plat for the replat of this piece of property on Hairtown Road. Currently, one lot, Lot 2 of the Judy Harris property. And the property owner is proposing to subdivide that into 3 lots. The city does not have, these pieces of properties do not have public sewer out here. So the developer would need to get approval from TDEC for underground septic disposal. It's zone R1 in the county for low-density residential. It meets county zoning requirements. It meets our sub-regs requirements, except the requirement for TDEC to certify that the lots as proposed are actually going to perk. Staff recommends approval subject to TDEC certification that each of these lots will meet minimum requirements for subsurface sewage disposal.
Sir, thank you. Have any questions for staff? Replat? No, seeing none. Anybody here wishing to speak for or against this replat? Seeing none. We will go ahead and close the public comment and open up for discussion and motions.
Motion to approve contingent upon approval from TDEC for the underground sewage disposal.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second, contingent upon the TDEC approval. Please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Chairman Zayons.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Next item up tonight on the agenda is we're moving into codes. We did move an item to number 7 on the agenda, the stewardship annexation. Do I have any interest in folks to address the stewardship annexation? And we can put the legislative things towards the end. Does anybody wish to go ahead and handle that? No, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Great, let's go ahead and do that. Can we do the stewardship annexation? Just get all the annexation
to?
stuff out of the way.
Okay. The Planning Commission at its meeting on February 11, that was last month, approved the stewardship annexation for 2 pieces of properties in Gray, with the recommendation for both properties to be zoned B5, Planned Community Business District. The City Commission approved the annexation on first reading with the amendment to the zoning, or rather B4. With the reasoning that the B5 zoning district was created to address a very specific situation in Gray. The only difference between the B4 and the B5 zoning district is that B5 does not permit the liquor stores. Now there is a liquor store in Gray, and there is no desire on the City Commission to be expanding the B5 zoning district unnecessarily. That is why this is coming back before you for your recommendation. Staff does not think that rezoning this to B4 will create any issues. The property owner, Balada, was present at the City Commission meeting and consented to it being zoned B4. So staff recommends that you approve the B4 zoning district and amend the plan of services as provided in your packet to include the B4 zoning district.
So amend the zoning district to be changed to B4 and amend the plan of services agreement to reflect the B4
To believe-
designation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? Nope. Anybody here wishing to speak for or against this amendment to the planned annexation and zoning? Seeing none, because there's no one here, we will close public comment and look for motions on the commission.
I move we accept the recommendation to rezone from B5 to B4.
And amend,
So two different motions, right?
we can do it together.
Oh,
And
we
amend the
can?
planning service.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
And amend the plan of services agreement to reflect the B4.
Withdraw your second, whatever he said.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the amendment to change this zoning district on the annexation to B4 and amend the plan of services agreement to reflect that. Call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart.
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
and Chairman Ziones.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda would be the, looking at accessory structures, I believe.
Yes, we have some text revisions related to Chapter 4 of the zoning code. Primarily, these are, the major changes are focused on accessory structures and the size and area of accessory structures, though we did address some other things, mainly concerning clarity in this chapter. Since we were visiting it, we figured we would address some multiple things that staff had been dealing with for some time. You may recall Mr. Mitchell had brought forth early on in his tenure some proposed revisions related to accessory structures that didn't get out of the workshop, but that had been teed up a while back. We also have Commissioner Pavlich, who had brought up some issues related to accessory structures. And then there's a number of issues with accessory structures going back years and years. You pick just about any book of minutes from the BZA, pick one up, flip to a page, there's probably a case about an accessory structure. So this is a section of the code, just like we discussed earlier with small cell. When you have code that is continually coming up for appeal, then it's time you look at that code and consider making changes. And so I'll get into the details of that regarding accessory structures, but I'm going to go through each section of the proposed changes and give background on all those changes, and then really focus in on the more major issues. We've added some clarity to the definition for accessory structure. We have some other definitions that have been added or adjusted. I want to pull out quickly pet grooming, which has been added, and then under kennel, and these are in alphabetical order, but really pet grooming and kennels are related to one another. So we have a list of permitted accessory uses for a home occupation. People can come in and apply to have a type of business at their home, and we allow pet grooming. But under the definition, and we also prohibit kenneling. So we permit pet grooming, prohibit kenneling. Under the definition of kenneling, we say that grooming is part of that. So we have some contradiction in the code. And so to address that, we're taking out grooming from the definition of kennel, and we're making a new definition for pet grooming. So now pet grooming alone can be a home occupation, but the other boarding, breeding, raising, all those aspects of kenneling are not allowed within a residential district. That's a proposed definition change. Lot lines, we've added additional language and diagrams to clarify the understanding of lot lines. You'll see a pretty hefty paragraph there for front, lot line front, and that is issues we've had where on corner lots, establishing which one is the front, and having residents come and say, you know, they're kind of choosing which one is the front, depending on whatever their need is, whatever they're trying to accomplish. So that once you establish your front, then you establish what your side and rear yards are going to be. And so it may behoove them to have the front on one side at one point, and then it be fronting on the other side at another. So we have established a process for determining the front, and I can go through that, or I can answer any questions about that, if there are any.
Curious, the people that are on the committee, were you all happy with the lot line front, this?
I changed some of the language based on feedback from committee, where I believe it builds upon itself a little more clearly than the way it kind of wove around before. This is language that was borrowed from Greenville, Tennessee, in fact, but has been edited.
To answer your question, yes.
For lot line rear, this was something we initially had not addressed, but it was brought up that there were some issues with really typos, and staff felt that there was some confusion here. And so this diagram on the right is in relation to how we can determine the rear lot line for an irregularly shaped lot. And so between the definition and the diagram, we think we've provided clarity there. The definitions for front yard, rear yard, and side yard are, again, just added clarity. And specifically for side yard, we've added this distinction between an interior property, an interior side yard, and an exterior side yard. And that is reflected in these diagrams, which we're planning to add, would like to add to our definitions. So we have an interior lot, which is kind of your standard lot. You have a neighbor on either side. You have a corner lot where you have right-of-way on two sides. And then you have a double frontage where you have right-of-way on the front and what would be the back. And so through this diagram, we can show where your rear setbacks are, your front setback line. And for each district, you would then measure your setbacks based on this example.
Mr. Manley, do you mind just going back to that prior diagram? Because that was not at our meeting.
No, this was so.
Can you just walk me
Okay, sure.
through that diagram?
Sure. So the definition of lot line rear means the lot boundary opposite and most distant from the front lot line. In the case of a triangular, pointed, or irregular lot, the rear lot line shall be an imaginary line 10 feet in length, completely within the lot, parallel to, and at the maximum point farthest from the front line.
Why 10 feet?
To establish a space of 10 feet. Why 10 feet? That was a standard that was found as kind of a best practice. That was a standard definition that we've found throughout the country to try and establish some point that would allow for kind of the establishment of, we're going to measure the backyard starting here. If we make it any wider, you start to really encroach into the backyard, but that's your rear lot line. Right. So you start measuring your rear setback from that point. Okay. Rear setbacks are the largest. So if we make it any wider than 10 feet, we're starting to encroach on people's backyards before they even start to measure. So I believe that seemed like a reasonable point, other than starting way back in the very point of a triangular or irregular space.
Thank you.
Typically seen on cul-de-sacs.
Are these definitions of setbacks and how you determine them going to be used throughout the rest of the code in determining how things are applied to primary building structures and all of this and that?
Yes, so Article 4, these are under definitions, so they apply for the rest of the zoning code.
Okay.
And then Article 4, where the rest of these changes are application of the zoning code, so that entire chapter is in place to cover zoning code-wide. All districts are covered by that.
Appreciate the clarification.
So getting into Chapter 4, under corner lots, what we've done is change, because of the diagrams, where if you look at corner lot, we now have interior side yard and we have exterior side yard. And so recognizing that kind of change of language, we've made adjustments to a corner lot. We also changed the way that it reads, so that there's a consistency in using percentages, number of percentages. So instead of 50% greater than, it's 150%. And we use 50% here as well. So there's some consistency in the language. On front yard setback, as one of the main goals in all of these changes is to look at ways that we can address our zoning code to accommodate infill development. And that's especially heightened with the fact that we no longer can have the annexation power that the city once had. So how do we grow internally? The measurement of front yard setbacks is a major one where we have infill lots people want to develop on, but we have kind of suburban setbacks that eat up a lot of these small lots. And so instead of having a 20-foot or 25-foot setback on a small urban lot, you can measure in either direction from that subject property 200 feet and take the average setback on that street. So if there's a 10-foot setback average across the street, you can have a 10-foot setback. But it's not it's a minimum, not a maximum. So that should address infill a little more clearly. And then again, on 4.7.5, just additional language that improves clarity for what that in the title, and then addressing the change of the definition for exterior side yard, and being more clear that the pavement is not always in the center of the right of way. So we need to be specific. We're talking about the center line of the right of way. Moving on to 4.13, this is the accessory structures section. Again, the Board of Zoning Appeals minutes are filled with examples here. We've got just one that I came across while searching for something else, two examples, both in the tree streets, both for variances for accessory structures from the setback. And so that's from 2004. And so this has been a recurring issue, and so we want to address that. As well as how it relates to accommodating infill development. And so the very first line we have, I'll also say that this code was initially written to address the average size lot, the average property in the city, and it has set numbers. And so what we're doing is trying to accommodate, base the regulations on how it relates to the principal dwelling and how it relates to the size. First sentence, we have accessory structures with the exception of boat docks and accessory uses are subject to the provisions of this section. So we're making an exception for boat docks that these following rules will not apply since they are distinct in character and limited in use across the city.
So I'm sorry, say that again.
Top sentence, accessory structures,
Okay.
comma, with the exception of boat docks, comma, and accessory uses are subject to the provisions of this section.
Okay, that's not on my packet then, okay.
Now, this is a recent change. This is out of committee. We discussed boat docks maybe for 5% of the meeting, the first meeting, and it didn't come up in our second committee meeting. And the way that it was presented to staff was to address issues with kind of large lot, estate lot parcels with large homes that front the lake. And so through the committee work and the provisions that we came up with to address this issue across the city, it was staff's understanding that we had addressed that issue to accommodate boat dock concerns as well. The email that came from Commissioner Pavlich on Sunday brought some more attention to this issue, and then through additional conversation and clarification, staff realized that it needed to be explicitly addressed in the code for situations other than large lot, large home. If you have a small lot and a small home on the lake, the rest of the provisions that we're about to go through could really restrict a property owner when it came to their boat dock. And we'll get into that a little bit more. This is the email. 4.13.1, we have proposed to strike this list of accessory structures rather than try to have an exhaustive, inclusive list of all accessory structures. We're just using our definition. And if it meets the definition, then it would be considered an accessory structure. This created confusion for staff and ongoing issues. We have to change the numbering going down. The list of prohibited accessory structures, we're striking mobile storage units. We have the use of shipping containers is a trend, a growing trend, and it's an approved building material according to the ICC. And so by removing this, we're opening up the possibility of an approved building material being used as an accessory structure. We are explicitly stating that accessory residential dwelling units are not part of these provisions. That is the case now. It's just not explicitly stated. And so to eliminate confusion about ADUs, we are making it very clear that you cannot have an accessory dwelling unit at this point in the city. However, there was a good, healthy discussion about this issue. This is something staff also feels very strongly about, needing to be brought to the Planning Commission. So what we would like to do is have a full set of workshops and potentially some public outreach regarding this issue and bring a full set of codes related to ADUs rather than, try and change it as part of these regulations. It's its own animal, so.
And would that require the revision of these codes again, or would that be its own separate code?
I think we would add a whole section of specific language that governs ADUs, and then we would strike that from this section.
I want to ask the members on the committee and the folks up here, the striking of the mobile storage units as building materials on properties, do we want to strike that?
Is not, even a mobile storage unit, is it not driven by the building code?
It is
Somebody
somewhat.
brought one of the pods in.
We have, so temporary storage is governed in another, in the same chapter for temporary uses. You can get a permit for up to 40 days? 60 days for a temporary storage permit. And that's governed by where you can place it, how long you can have it there.
What we're talking about here are
Freight cars?
freight cars and
Shipping containers.
shipping containers and that type of thing.
Yeah.
They can be, you can put a facade on them, you can do whatever, but it's something that we're seeing, and it's an approved building material, so.
I have seen people take these and put a different frontage on them and build them up, and it's almost like a mobile home. You just drop it in place, pipe water, and plug into it. It's ready to go.
For a dwelling, and this is just for storage.
For garage, I've seen people use them
For
for
garage,
garages,
yeah.
motorcycle garages. Yeah.
Any thoughts else from the commission about that? I might be the only one that I would leave that in there. There's no way I would take that out.
If it is no longer mobile and is set on a foundation and it meets building code, and then it's a building, it's no longer a mobile storage unit, does that change maybe how you view that?
Well, you live in one of the more established neighborhoods inside the city limits, and somebody brings a
Freight car.
A freight car, a tractor trailer, knocks the wheels out from under and sets it on the ground in your neighborhood.
You would have to meet our provisions for accessory structures. If it was in a neighborhood that had an HOA, then their provisions for aesthetics or whatever standards they have would govern that. And if it was in one of our historic districts, the only way they could do that would be if they wrapped it in some kind of facade that matched the front. But other than that,
What about the plain vanilla neighborhood?
yeah, so that would,
They could do that, right?
if there was no HOA and it met setbacks.
I think for some people, I think it's a reasonable, cheap alternative. If you want to have a garage, if you want to have a shed, you can bring these out there. It's no different than, it's probably better quality than what you're getting at Lowe's from the parking lot, dropping it out there, putting a door on it.
I disagree.
Those, prone to deterioration much
Probably
more than this
concerned
would be.
aesthetically than
Absolutely.
you are, yeah.
That's
And
just-
that,
Yeah. I wouldn't do it.
But Ben's right, it's, in practice, they're more substantial
Higher
and
quality.
probably more long-lasting than.
Oh, they're
and-
made for
and more
shipping.
useful.
They're supposed to be on ships.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be in my front yard or my backyard.
Do you want me to continue with the proposal, and we can,
So are you saying that we should put mobile storage units back in?
I would not red strike mobile storage units. I would leave that in. If we wanted to have that discussion at a later date with accessory dwelling units, I would leave that in. That's my opinion.
Well, let's let him get, let's
Yeah,
mark
keep
that.
going. That's just-
and
I
let's
wanted
get
to open
through
it
it
up for
and
questions.
See what.
Yeah.
and I mean, that's a good point. If we're coming back to this with ADUs, we could address it then. And maybe address some of those aesthetic concerns at that time. The other big one here was that you're not allowed to dwell in an RV, but that was not explicitly stated here, and so we've made that very clear, that you cannot use it for storage or for dwelling. And that's actually an issue that we have across the city. Okay, area regulations. Except where accessory structures are otherwise addressed in this ordinance, accessory structures in all districts shall meet the following requirements. A, be located only in the side, interior side for corner lots or rear yard and subject to the following setbacks. I actually have proposed to tweak that just a bit so it reads better. So that it reads, be located only in the rear or side yard, parentheses, interior side yard for corner lots, in parentheses, and subject to the following setbacks.
That's better.
So it just reads a little bit cleaner. 1, minimum side and rear yard setback of 7 1/2 feet. So 7 1/2 feet off the side and the rear. That's the same as what we have now. Number 2, where adjacent to existing improved dedicated alley rights-of-way, and where there is no conflicting drainage or utility easement, a 0 lot line, no setback, may be utilized along the rear property line. Additionally, corner placement may be permitted, however, only in circumstances where an accessory structure is placed along the rear property line, shall a 0 lot line, no setback, be permitted along the side property line. So, in the places where we have alleys, which is about 9% of the parcels in the city, are adjacent alleys, have alley access, and are also small lot, narrow lot, urban parcels, we are making a distinction for those because they are distinct in character and are really the same ones that have come up time and time again within the BZA. They're also the ones that have conflict with our design guidelines in our Tree Streets Historic District, and are also where we see this traditional pattern of development for them to be placed further back on those lots. We are trying to address that here and basically legalize a placement that was used historically in these neighborhoods. Some of the wordiness is due to making sure that we don't allow someone to have a 0 side yard setback up close to the principal structures. So first requiring that they can be 0 on the side, but only if they're 0 in the rear. And so we kind of tried to make that clearer in this language.
So you can have on a corner lot, a side yard on the outside? Is there?
No,
is there- you
corner
can't-
placement, meaning you can place it in the corner of your lot, not a corner lot.
So if you have a corner lot, on
There's-
the outside side of the house, can you have an accessory dwelling unit? What if you have a fence, if you have a privacy fence, there's a street out there, you have your home, but you have a storage unit to the side of your house?
So
on the
corner
side.
lot-
Next to the street,
You would have to be in the rear. You could not be in your exterior side yard.
or it could be in that
You
bottom
couldn't be on the
right-hand
street
corner.
right away side.
So what if you had a privacy fence that came out and fenced that area in?
Fence this off?
The exterior side yard?
It would have to be
What would be the
inside
setback?
this dotted line, behind the principal dwelling.
Do you see what I'm getting at?
I'm not sure. I'm following.
If you have a privacy fence that comes out close to the end of this lot line on that side yard, the exterior side yard?
The street?
Yep, up near the
Okay.
street. that's all a privacy fenced-in area that would be reasonable to be used. Why not allow someone to have a structure there?
In other words, bottom right-hand corner.
The idea behind this is to treat both as frontages.
But I'm saying it won't function as frontage if there's a privacy fence there.
On a secondary side, the setback is less than it would be in the front.
That's not the issue. No matter what the setback is, what the chairman is saying is that if there was a fence along the side street, and I assume it would then continue along the alley, why couldn't the building be in that bottom right-hand corner? In other words, an exception to, because it's screened. If it wasn't screened, I don't think you'd vote for that, would you?
No, I wouldn't, because it's
Yeah.
foreign, but if behind a privacy fence or structure, a buffer, a large hedge, then that area of a person's lot could go on and function more like an interior lot.
Like I said, typically, these side yards fronting the street are being treated in a way that's similar to the front yard, where you have a setback and there's
Are
no
you listening?
structures.
This is where, I mean,
My answer is no different. I mean,
does
that's.
anybody else
that's
have
a
an objection on this?
Traditional,
Does anybody see how
single-family
that
zoning.
would make sense with that?
Yes, I do. Certainly an upscale
And I've seen a number of
neighborhood.
homes that are done like this.
You can have a 2-acre
Absolutely.
lot
That's
on
not a weird case scenario. It's very reasonable.
Let me point something out, I'm sorry I'm getting into this, but.
We wondered when you were going to come up here.
It'll have a front yard like that one here.
But there's an alley in
Only
between.
there,
There's an alley in between.
is there an alley back there?
No, this is across the city.
No,
There may
no.
be or there may not be. If there's a lot right here that fronts here, they've got a front yard this way, like that one. A fence there might hide your view that way, but you would need something here if you're gonna go that way.
Sure.
Because this
That fence
guy's
can
front
cross.
yard's gonna see what you put there.
That's right.
Now, if you put it here, it's kind of off his side. So when he's looking out his front window, he's not looking into a shed. So you have to think about what goes around it.
Well, but the first criteria is an alley. If there's not an alley, well,
Not for the-
maybe that's not where you're coming from.
The corner lot, exterior side yard, it applies to the entire city.
So, I understand that, but we're talking about placing a structure in a corner of a lot. That's what you're,
Yeah, just to that
so
exterior side.
what you're
of it.
asking is, even if there wasn't an alley
Yeah.
involved, you'd like the flexibility to put something in
If
the
I
very
privacy-
bottom corner or the left or right.
If I privacy fenced off my
If you
lot,
had it
I'd like to build
fenced.
a
See, that's a
new
whole
zone.
different ballgame.
So we have, the only place we require, well, we don't require privacy fences anywhere in the city code, except for in our buffer requirements. We do say if you use a privacy fence, then you can reduce the amount of vegetated buffer you would have. So we'd be talking about some standards related to this, requiring screening and buffers that would be very specific to this scenario. It's just not found elsewhere in our code. Sure.
So you're actually talking about differences.
For Hassan and Matt, do we currently regulate fencing, other than in the historic districts? Do we regulate fencing anywhere in the?
No
in the
standards
ordinance?
for fencing.
Okay. And so,
If nobody else has concern on it, we don't need to waste any time on it. I just wanted to bring up.
Right. Okay.
I like to be able to use my property the way I want.
Well, yeah, and if you want to put a fence around whatever's building down there, why not?
It is kind of ironic that we would allow a fence along that property line, but we're not allowing a building, an accessory building. It is,
Fences can come out to your property line, except for on the corner, the very corner at the intersection, you have to preserve a sight triangle.
Right.
That's pretty much the only
The 10 foot.
limitation.
what you're going to run into in a situation like this, I certainly understand exactly, and I'm sure Matt and Hassan understand it as well. It's a valid concern, especially if you've got additional screening. Typically, zoning ordinances avoid applying landscape buffer standards to single-family lots. Generally, you're going to have exemptions to the landscape buffering standards for all single-family lots, and that's a national exception. Since our ordinances don't regulate fencing except in certain areas, for example, in the site triangle or in the historic districts, we would be adding an additional regulation and then applying this ability through a conditional approval. And so rather than it just being, you being allowed to just place the accessory structure here, it would have to be done only if you have that type of fencing, which we don't currently regulate. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to strike a balance in terms of not adding additional regulation. We're really trying to open up and allow for alternatives and allow for folks to be able to have additional accessory structures in their rear yard, but at the same time strike a balance exactly in line with what the city engineer was talking about in terms of considering your neighbors and other neighboring properties. So if the planning commission feels that it's appropriate to begin adding fence regulations, that's another conversation we can have. But I would recommend that we look at fencing in general, as opposed to just saying we're only going to regulate fencing in this particular case outside of a historic district. So I think that's where the quagmire lies.
Could they go to the BZA with this if they said, hey, look, I've got a privacy fence and I want to put an accessory structure over to the side, and would that be something that they would
No.
even have an option to have an exemption for?
No, sir.
In a weird situation? No?
Well, I mean, if there was some physical problem with the property, but not just based on desire.
Also, I think it'd have to be a pretty tall privacy fence, because some of these things are almost, well, I think 80% or something ballpark of the principal structure.
No
So
higher, no
It's
taller.
gonna be a very tall structure. You're gonna, I mean, if I live across the street and you wanna put that shed right against your side yard,
Okay, well, I appreciate the discussion. Thanks for the illumination. Alan, thanks for your input. I appreciate where we're going to protect the neighbor on the side, too, who has a front yard looking at their side yard. Thank you.
Any other questions on the alley, the placement and the removal of rear and side setbacks for alley adjacent parcels? And I have a map on here. This map here shows you all the highlighted purple and blue parcels are all the parcels in the city, except for a handful of R2C zone properties out near the edge of the city that have alleys. So this is 99% of the parcels. The ones that are highlighted in blue are all smaller than our average R2 lot size. And so we're talking about 9% of the total parcels in the city, a large majority of which are much smaller than our average lot size. So when we look at the next, provision 3, in non-residential or multifamily development, accessory structures shall not encroach into any required landscape or buffer. And B, C, and D come together here to really reshape how we look at the size. The cumulative gross floor area of accessory structures, so all accessory structures that are on a parcel together, shall not exceed 700 square feet or 50% of the gross floor area of the principal structure, whichever is greater.
Why do we pick 700 versus the previous 850?
Detached garage. So 850 was based on 50% of the average size house in the city at the time that was written. So they base it on an accessory structure could be 50% of the size of the average principal structure. So instead of using the average structure, what we're doing is saying we're going to allow that size to fluctuate with the principal dwelling, but we're going to guarantee that even the small house has enough square footage allotted to be able to have a detached garage, so
Well,
that
they
anybody in the
used to-
city can have a
What I'm
detached
saying is you
garage.
used to be guaranteed 850. Now you're only guaranteed 700. Why do we knock
It
it
was
down to 150?
essentially an arbitrary number, and so getting away from a fixed number that sets it for everybody, we're setting a
No.
guarantee for everybody.
I like the guarantee of 50%, but why not keep the 850? That's where we were before, and that way everything that was 850 before with the property still is pretty well there, and
700 square feet is.
7 by 10
is
versus 8.5
What
by
you need
10.
for a detached garage. 850 is over that, exceeds that. And so what we're really aiming to do is make the size scalable and relational to the principal structure. If that answers your question.
So what was the rationale for changing the 850?
The intent is to make the standard relate to the principal dwelling. So it would scale
50%
up.
does that.
It would scale up and it would scale down.
50% does that.
That's correct, and that was what we had as our provision moving forward. In order to not penalize small properties, we put a maximum of 700. I mean, a minimum guarantee of 700
it
essentially.
used to be 850.
We can change it to 850
But that- I
if
mean-
that's what you prefer.
Actually, the 850 penalizes them less.
Yeah, your wording's backwards.
Yeah.
He's right. You don't say a minimum of 700, you say cannot exceed 700.
Whichever is greater. So they're guaranteed to be able to build a 700 square foot accessory structure.
You got that. But why not guarantee them
Because it
850?
wasn't, that 850 doesn't have any relationship to what a detached garage, it's based on being able to build a detached garage. This is what we discussed at committee when it came up there. is what can we guarantee? And this change came because of our discussion where we had,
You know, the weakness of the committee is that everybody's not sitting there.
So,
We
the
know we've
original
got the benefit
proposal-
of other perspectives. All we're asking, and Ben and I'll apologize because we weren't smart enough to think about that. But I think the chairman is bringing up a valid issue. Why not keep it at 850?
so our
Is there
original.
somebody else that doesn't understand the question?
You're welcome to make that change. The original proposal was just 50% GFA. And during our discussion in committee,
Let's change it to 850.
There we go.
I'm putting it on.
I'm just answering the question of what the rationale was.
Great.
Okay, hang on one
Let's not
second.
be restricted
Hang on one second.
arbitrarily.
Mr. Chair, can I
Yes.
add to this?
Sure.
If that's all right. Part of the justification for the 700, number one, and Matt was alluding to, the minimum area necessary in order to have a two-car detached garage. And that's based on information that we received from our development services manager, Dave McClellan, who is a licensed architect. And so we need to be able to rely off of a design professional's recommendation. The other is something to just keep in mind is much of this language, much of this amendment is being done to help create scalability between urbanized areas and suburban areas. And if you recall in different portions of the amendment, we're proposing to actually allow for a zero setback off of the rear alley or off of alleys, and allowing for and encouraging accessory structures in these urbanized areas. The bringing the footprint down to what is required, what is necessary based on an architect's recommendation to have a two-car garage. That 700 square feet from a form and from a massing perspective is more appropriate at 700 square feet in a tight, higher density urbanized area, especially where you're going to zero the setback out right up against the alley, as opposed to 850. This doesn't mean that on more suburban lots, larger lots, you couldn't have a larger structure. It allows for an appropriate accessory structure in those smaller, tighter urban areas, especially where it could zero out up against the alley.
So we're trying to prevent folks from on very small lots, going in and putting 850 square feet.
Can I put
This
in a-
is
can I
related to the
just
size of the
have a
structure, not the
confession?
size of the lot.
The 850 previous was an upper limit, not a lower limit. It was an upper limit that you shall not exceed. The 700 is now a guarantee of a lower limit, plus whatever percentage might be, could be greater. So my apologies. The understanding is that the actual proposed amendments that you're putting out there are actually provide more latitude for the homeowner than what we had before. There is my understanding.
For everyone that has square footage greater than 1,400 square feet.
And then
If you have under 1,400 square feet, then you get to stay at that 700 mark and not have to continue down with the 50% relationship.
Because before, if you had a 1,200 square foot house, you couldn't have built an 850 anyway.
You could have. You were guaranteed 850 square
You
feet.
were guaranteed 850.
Yes.
Which is greater, which is,
But it
that was my assumption. I was starting to think I was wrong. Okay, no, then, all right, I would keep it at 850.
So again, the change was to make it in relation to the principal dwelling, but also make sure we had a minimum detached garage for those structures that were under 1,400 square feet. That 700 square feet, again, we're trying to keep it in relationship to the principal dwelling. And so at some point, the principal dwelling is of a particular size, a small size, that 850 square feet seemed excessive in relationship to that principal dwelling. So we reduced that to what would be needed for a detached garage for everyone.
Another point to make is if we do end up addressing, accessory residential dwelling units, this would apply to that as well.
Potentially, we could have an entire different set of area regulations for dwelling units, for accessory dwelling units.
Let's put it back on 850, take
Let's
him
put
up
it-
on his offer.
Yeah, let's put it back on 850. Go ahead, I don't want to
To
stop
your
the
point
flow.
about this being, on small lots, that C is related to the lot size. So the cumulative footprint of accessory structures, again, all accessory structures on a lot, shall not exceed 700 square feet, the footprint shall not exceed 700 square feet, or 25% of the total rear yard area, whichever is greater. So again, the same concept. They are guaranteed to be able to have a footprint of 700 square feet. Or if they have more than 700 square feet worth of yard area available, then it could be larger than that, but no larger than 25% of the rear yard. So again, this is adjusting code, so it's not a set number, but it's a number that fluctuates based on the size of the lot. So it will scale up for very large lots, and it'll scale down for compatibility on very small lots, but guaranteed 700 square feet.
Are we suggesting then that we're changing just B to 850 and not C, or are we changing?
A guaranteed minimum to 850.
We're not changing C? And do they contradict each other if we do that?
They would if you did not change both.
Yeah, both.
But that, okay. That doesn't deal with Preston's concern of an extra small lot.
Can we provide for some, if we're going to just change it, can we provide for some justification in the change? We certainly understand the importance and the need for those property rights. At the same time, we need to be, we need to consider the impact that this could have on these tighter, more dense urbanized areas. Much of the zoning in these areas is already established in a medium density, medium to low density range. For example, even in the tree streets, it's zoned R2. We'll be looking at urban zoning in the future, but allowing for a bigger footprint on those smaller lots, and even in other areas like Mountain Home and other urbanized, denser areas, allowing for these structures to be larger on the smaller lots, and especially if we do adopt legislation that allows for ADUs, it is highly likely, and I can tell you this from personal experience being elsewhere, it is almost a guarantee that people will start putting an ADU on top of those two-car garages. And so what this is all about is this is about compatibility and comparability in scale with that development type and with the neighborhood. This is, we promise to you, this is not about trying to take away property rights. This is about compatibility and scale. That's what this is about.
That makes sense in my mind, that
The 850 cap is what we had before on the right side. You couldn't go greater than 850 without meeting a set of standards through a special exception process. So we're removing that burdensome bureaucratic process, opening up the cap. So if you have a large lot, large house, you don't have to come do this. And so we're really trying to get out of the way and accommodate what property owners may want to do and what we're hearing from people, what they want to do. The last one being that related to height, that it shall not exceed the height of the principal structure as defined in this ordinance. That line was added because the height is defined differently. How you measure height is defined differently for a principal structure and an accessory structure. An accessory structure is measured from the very top of the roof, the very point, the ridge line. The principal structure is, for a gabled roof, is measured at the mean point between the ridge line and the eave. And so, because of that, you will never have an accessory structure that could exceed that average point for a principal structure. So it's not that accessory structure is going to be 1 inch shorter than the principal structure. It will be, it would have to be 1 inch shorter than the halfway point on that roof line. If that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Moving on, I'm still not clear about the 700. I think we've agreed to the 700. I'm not clear whether that's footprint or total square footage.
It's both. So under B, we're saying if you're at 50% of a small house, and that's a one-story house, that's 1,400 square feet.
I don't care about what the main house is. Once you do the calculation, and the calculation says I can have 823 square feet, is that footprint of my accessory building, or is that the total square footage if I decide to build a multi-story building?
For B, it's total square footage, it's gross floor area. So that's total square footage in the structure. But that also is impacted by these other provisions.
Right.
So you couldn't just have a footprint of 700, but you have 823, so you can build an extra 123 square feet up to a second story if you have a one-story house, because you can't be taller than the principal structure.
Well, but I could get 2 stories in.
Not if you have a one-story principal.
No, but if I have a 2
That's what I'm saying, they all work together.
I understand.
That's why we have provisions for each. Footprint being, if you have a 2-story, if you are allotted, if 50% of your gross floor area equals 1,400 square feet, then you can have 700 square foot footprint, but you can have another 700 up on the second floor.
But the opposite, can I have 1,400 square foot footprint?
If it doesn't exceed 25% of your rear yard.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, it scales up and down.
So I just want to clarify. Are we sticking with the 700? Are we?
Yeah. I vote.
I think so, because it looks like the other 850 was a guarantee of a maximum, was a
Preston
guarantee.
makes a valid.
I'm fine with that.
Smaller lots, yeah, it would be huge, so.
And thank you for taking your time to explain it and help us work through it.
We're trying.
That's right.
This is about.
No, this is good.
Okay.
So you've struck out any of the exceptions that go to the BZA. Is there no path to the BZA for something here?
And we have freed up Will Ryder with having to hear accessory structure cases. We have still actually accounted for some of these provisions, but now it would be approved administratively, and we've actually opened up and maximized. So instead of having to go to the BZA and being restricted to 30% of your floor area of the principal dwelling, now you don't have to go to the BZA, and you can have 40%, 50% of your gross floor area.
Right.
similar materials of the principal dwelling, we do not have any kind of aesthetic requirement, though that may be something that comes up with ADUs. You no longer have to meet the district setbacks. So if you were in an R2 and you wanted to have an accessory structure that was greater than 850, you had to meet the 30-foot rear setback and the 10-foot side setback, and that's where you had to place your accessory structure. Now we're saying you can be 7.5 feet off the side, 7.5 feet off the rear, and you can go as big as allowed based on the circumstances on your lot, and you don't have to come to BZA.
It seems like the overall spirit of these revisions is freeing up.
Oh, this is a reduction in
Yeah.
in regulations.
It's less
Yes.
restrictive than prior.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. Accessory structures shall not be taller than the principal dwelling. We've taken care of that. We've carried that over. And then there's no other standards that would come up from the BZA. We've taken the cap of 2 accessory structures. You were limited to 2. Now we're just saying cumulatively, you can be no bigger than what's allotted for your circumstances. So all that is being proposed to be struck. And I know that this came up with boat dock discussion most recently, but if you can tell, this has been in the pipeline for some time. This is an issue that staff has been hearing about from residents over a great deal of time, whether through applications to the BZA or just through conversations from people who didn't want to take it to the BZA because they couldn't meet those standards. But now they'll be able to do it. They'll be able to have a detached garage on their lot because of this.
You had mentioned earlier, and I've seen where this has been helpful in the city, where you can't have an accessory structure without a primary dwelling.
Yes.
And when you want to have people who are in a residential setting who try to put a greenhouse on their yard without building a primary structure first, the neighbors really appreciate that restriction. But when it comes to a boat dock, that's a very normal and accepted use in that setting for somebody to have a boat dock, as regardless of whether or not a primary structure is built.
Yes, so we had that brief discussion beforehand, and so the placement of 4.13 in the introduction sentence,
Yes,
the
sir.
exception of boat docks, as it's written up here, places that above the requirement that you have a principal dwelling constructed before an accessory structure.
Okay,
So that would
now
not apply.
You can have a boat dock.
By itself.
It doesn't matter, you can have it by itself, and in fact, the square footage of the boat dock or whatever dwelling unit is there does not impact what you are building on the rest of your lot.
Not according to city zoning code. That's a great point. TVA regulates.
TVA regulates it.
So there are other governing bodies that we're kind of
Right.
deferring to on this.
So we let them deal with what you're going to build on the lake. The city doesn't care that it's there or not there, it's now out of its eye.
That's correct.
Which handles Mr. Pavlich's concern to his satisfaction.
Have you communicated this to?
Yes, we've had a phone call.
He was happy
I
with
told him
that
I'd follow up after the
resolution
meeting
on
to
that?
confirm. Oh, yeah, he was pleased.
That meets the spirit of what my concern was from the beginning on it, that he had a concern too.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a preliminary
Okay.
phone call today to make sure we were on the same page and make sure there was anything what had happened is through these proposed changes, staff felt like that incorporated his concerns because of how freeing we've made it.
In carriage houses, ADUs, we can deal with later.
Deal at a later time.
Gotcha.
These are just some diagrams, just in case we needed to refer to some examples. The one on the left is actually, comes illustration straight out of our design guidelines for the tree streets. That's a heavy spot where these current regulations are just banging heads with the pattern of development in those historic neighborhoods, to the point where even our design guidelines show accessory structures all the way back at the rear of the lot. So this would accommodate that on alleys. Some examples. Okay, so moving on to 4.13, point new 5, accessory uses, just clearing up. We don't have, this is not restricted to the planning division. This would be for the Director of Development Services or their designee to make any judgment calls on home occupations. Clearing up some language here on temporary uses. We've had some confusion with the public on what this means, and so just cleaning up that and giving a little more flexibility to staff with reasonable conditions. in response to what has been proposed, it impacts every single residential zoning district in the zoning code. So we would have to go through and strike any reference to limitations on height and setbacks all throughout the zoning code. My colleague here pointed out that when you have restrictions that cover the entire city in one section of your code, then you shouldn't have other places in your code that also are redundant about that restriction. So not only are we cleaning this up, we're not adding language back that reflects what's already in Chapter 4. We've got it in Chapter 4. It doesn't need to be all through Chapter 6 for all the zoning districts. And so that will affect all the numbers. We'll have to renumber every list of permitted use where we have changes under permitted uses.
I want to congratulate you on attention to detail with that. That's nice.
Appreciate that. We want to get this right. There are a few little spots where we're making some changes, referring back to these exceptions that are under the A1, just making sure we refer back that they don't apply. They are exceptions from these new restrictions, and just pointing back with a number back to that portion of the code. And under MX, we talked about accessory dwelling units. They are actually allowed in the MX. There are some provisions for accessory residential units. It's the only district that allows that. But under permitted uses, it just had the words accessory structures and uses, and we wanted it to be clear in the list of permitted uses that accessory dwelling units were allowed in that district, and that you could find the provisions for those ADUs in subsection 6.24.4.2D. Staff recommends approval.
Got a question?
That was easy.
All right.
I mean, we plan to punish you every time.
You guys are pushovers. Y'all make it so easy.
Come up with a plan.
No? Thanks for answering our questions to see.
We got one item, is mobile storage.
Yeah, the mobile storage.
That's the one item.
That's the one question.
We didn't deal with it.
Happy to have further discussion at the committee level and bring that back up at another point.
But we may not need to.
Here?
If I'm just one person who wants to strike it, I would strike it. Does anybody else want to strike it?
Or not strike it.
Or, not strike
not
it.
strike it.
Neither person would like to leave it in place. Because it doesn't have anything in there about required facades if you do use it, or required aesthetics. You can get a rusty pods container and throw it out there, and somebody goes, look, it's my new garage.
You could also take just sheet plywood and just make a garage out of that, too.
We don't regulate aesthetics. We regulate property maintenance, but we don't regulate aesthetics anywhere outside of our overlays in our historic zoning. So
That's why that's in there. Because in certain ways we do. We do with many of our standards. It's exactly what we do.
But not in residential, right?
I think that's what he's arguing is in other ways we are by having prohibited uses, and we can't have
Setbacks and structures and
single-family
everything. It's all about
manufactured
the
homes
aesthetic.
in the city. New ones placed. That's kind of a similar aesthetic issue.
Look out my front yard at your dwelling unit on a corner lot, well, maybe. I don't want to be driving down and seeing everybody drop freight cars in the back either in the city. I'm not sure that I'm ready to accept that in the city dropped everywhere
There's a
haphazardly.
whole lot to shipping containers, shipping container homes and accessory structures. Let's table that part.
Yeah, I think we can bring back more information and maybe address that issue. And so we
Yeah.
hear your concerns.
Oh, I've
It's-
seen people develop them and build them, and I know it's cool. I wouldn't want to be next to it.
Staff staff has had conversation about these container homes, and there were varying opinions among staff. As you can see, the other provisions of this code were the primary concern, so we're happy to discuss that further and come back.
I want to be careful. I want to be clear. I'm one voice on this. If everybody else says approve it, fine. I spoke.
Let's chew on it.
Yeah, I think we should chew on it.
Okay.
Wait.
So we're tabling it.
Looking for a motion to.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
On the definition of accessory structure, are you meaning for a two-dimensional patio to be an accessory structure? You mean something with height, width, and length?
It has to be above 30 inches off the ground, or it would not be considered a structure. So a patio would be just like
A
pavement.
ground level patio?
Yeah, it does not, they are exempt from setbacks.
Okay. You threw me when you threw the exception about a swimming pool in.
That is considered a structure under this, an in-ground swimming pool where you're,
Well, if you read your definition of patio, just a plain ground level patio would be a structure unless you describe it differently.
definition of patio. Yeah.
Patios and decks weren't considered accessory
I don't think
structures.
we mean for them to be, but this is the way the definition's written. I
Right.
think you can read it and
You
say
wanna be
that, oh, a
careful.
patio applies here.
Yeah. Do you want to approve the whole thing minus, and just come back and chew on it, or do you want to chew on the whole thing?
I don't
Maybe
care.
fix the boat dock thing for you if you're happy with the rest of it.
That's a good point.
I hate to, I don't want to steal the whole thing.
I think we're fine. I would go ahead and approve it.
Definition of patio in the zoning code?
I think
Are
it
you
fits what
asking,
Jamie-
do I know it?
Are you referring, yes.
No, I'm just reading accessory structure, and when I read accessory structure definition, I think a patio would apply, would be under that
Oh, no.
definition.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought you meant that we had a separate definition for
No, I'm just
patio, and
saying,
it was
so a
conflicting.
patio fits your definition of accessory structure.
It doesn't because it's not a structure.
Okay,
so-
that's, a structure is not defined.
Yeah, it is defined
Oh, it is?
in the definition for the zoning code. And so
So
a
what's the
patio would not
definition
meet
of
the
structure?
definition of a structure, so therefore it could not be an accessory structure.
What's the definition of structure?
Is a gazebo considered a structure?
Yes.
You just have a
yeah.
covering?
Is it supported by walls and posts?
What if you don't have, if you just have posts?
It can
no
be
walls?
open air.
You know what I'm saying, like posts, no walls, but a fire pit kind of thing? Is that considered a structure?
Fire pit would not be.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
a fire pit on one wall and then posts, people do this
Okay.
entertainment huts?
Structure means anything constructed or erected, the use of which requires location on the ground, comma, or attachment to something having location on the ground, comma, which includes a manufactured home, a gas or a liquid storage tank, or other man-made facilities or infrastructures.
And that, a patio.
Now, I would
doesn't
agree.
include that?
Now, under accessory structures, there is a provision on height. If you're
So
not,
you were saying, you saying it's got 3 dimensions, height, width, and length.
for accessory structures, yes, it has got a
Oh,
height.
you might
and-
just change the wording to say with 3 dimensions.
So is a deck an
A
accessory
deck
structure?
is only considered a deck if it's 30 inches above the ground.
So it's a porch, then it becomes a porch. Got to have a rail and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
If it's, and a deck has a 7.5-foot setback requirement. Anything under 30 inches does not have that. It's not considered a deck. And so you could pave a sidewalk around the side of your house. You could go right up to your property line.
But a
You're
deck
not
with a
30
roof is not an accessory structure.
A what?
A deck with a roof,
A
shade,
deck with a roof would be,
is an accessory structure.
yeah.
Okay,
Anything above 30 inches.
gotcha.
That's pretty much our
Okay.
rule of thumb.
I would agree with Commissioner Dagenhart that if we added means a three-dimensional.
Yeah. So there's no confusion. I mean, there is, I will agree that, you know, these questions, as staff, we have to refer to this section, which refers to this section, and then back to this section, and if we can make it cleaner and clearer, that's better for the public, better
But isn't
for
it-
staff.
I mean, isn't a pad like this, it's still three-dimensional?
A pad is basically 2-dimensional, length and width. Well, you know, I'm not
Yeah,
talking
no,
about what's in the
I
ground.
can't get out of
That's
this.
called, right by the wording you used, it does have height.
We could say above 30
It's got
inches,
plus four.
three-dimensional with more
We
than
might-
30 inches
This is
tall.
kind of one of those things where, you know,
Exceeding
not to
30
be,
inches.
not to be understood as a, I mean, you know, how precise do we need to be with that it's not interpretable? A good point. I don't know, what is
I'm glad you're
this?
saying that, because you can overwrite.
Right.
And so we don't want to do that. Why don't we, if we could, we will go back, now, keep in mind that the definition of accessory structure already exists in the code. So we're not creating a new definition.
Okay,
There was the clarification part, but that's already in the code, and we've been applying it for decades. But how about this? Doesn't mean that it's the right definition. With your blessing, because of all the work that's gone into this, we would ask that if you're okay with the bulk of what's been done here tonight, go ahead and move on that, and then allow us to find, because one of the best things you can do, there is no need to reinvent the wheel in the zoning world. We'll look at other municipalities and see who's got a really good definition for accessory structure. We will do that, and then also table and have another conversation about the shipping containers and mobile storage units. So if you could remove those two pieces from this, but then consider the rest of it, it would be much appreciated.
That sounds fantastic. I think it's a lot of work, and I think people are looking forward to it moving forward. So, do we have a motion along those lines to approve these zoning amendments and changes with the exception of the striking of the mobile storage unit language, and with the, how do you want to, and with clarification on the definition of accessory structure?
I'll make that motion.
The motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll. All right.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Chairman Ziones.
Yes.
Motion approved.
I recommend Nicole for a raise.
Second.
Sir.
Somebody ship Jamie a beer.
In a shipping container.
Nice one. All right, do we have, discuss amendments to subdivision regulations and access standards? Did you want to discuss that? That was item number 8.
I'm going to be pretty quick on this one.
Okay. Just kidding.
Thought we were done.
I heard somebody's stomach growl.
That was mine.
Right, this is intended to be a discussion. This is intended to be a discussion in which staff gets feedback from the planning commissioners with respect to the subdivision regulations amendments that we're proposing, addressing the issues of accessibility standards currently in our subdivision regulations. We've had a lot of discussions on matters of private drive and public streets and all of that. And the Land Use and Transportation Committee has met multiple times on this particular issue and drafted regulations on this. General Herrera has been very, very instrumental, made a lot of contribution on this. Others have made a lot of input. And we've come up with a language that you currently have in front of you. Now, our last meeting, last month, you voted to have a public hearing on these and final approval next month on April 14. So what we want to make sure we have today is that the text, the Planning Commission is comfortable with the text, basically. If there are any amendments that need to be made before you vote on the final text next month, please provide us that information. Anything you want clarified, anything you want changed, it will be very important that you provide that information today so that we can have a kind of, to use the language of Congress, a clean deal.
It's nice to have this now so we can review it, and then individuals can even email the staff over it, I'm sure. Send some information over the month for you to look at and consider.
Yes, if there are any inputs. So one of the things, the first things that the committee did when we met over 3 times that we have met is to look at the stakeholders, define the problem. What are we really looking at? We just come in and we say private drive, but what about private drive? We need to identify the specific problems that are associated with these access standards and write regulations that seek to address those problems. So this is a solution approach to writing regulations instead of just, coming up with what we think is good or what we think is theoretically appropriate. So we identified that we have 4 or 5 key stakeholders. You've got developers, and the design professionals whom they hire to design whatever projects they have and turn into the city. They have got their own concerns on issues of access, specifically those standards related to private drives and others. We've got the citizens who acquire these properties, especially homeowner associations, and then maybe they find out later on, oh, so you mean the city is not going to be maintaining this road? And then they bring Pontiana Place to you for approval because they didn't know upfront. So we've got, that's another class of stakeholders. We've got emergency responders, the 911 folks who have to respond to any emergency on these pieces of properties, and they need access. They need a way, they need wayfinding, basically. That is their main concern. That is what we had, for example, when we're dealing with Pontiana Place. And then you've got the city, which is Planning Commission, the city as a whole, the approving authority, Public Works Department, which if you accept these private drives, then that becomes a maintenance liability. We have to deal with it, with whatever is eventually handed over to the city. So we identified these different stakeholders and basically posed the question, what are the issues that each of these stakeholders has as far as the plans we're dealing with are concerned? And then secondly, we looked at the regulations that other cities around us and in other areas have. Basically, it came down to three. We've got cities that have just totally outlawed everything and say, everybody, you must do a public street. Everybody build a public street, case closed. You've got cities that have accommodated these private drives or private access ways, whatever way you want to put it in their code. Basically just open it, it's permitted. And then you've got others that have provided a kind of a scale. If you're doing development right up to this level, then you can do a private drive. Above that level, you must do a public street. So we looked at all those different alternatives. So we looked at the concerns that developers have. So you have three main developers and professional designers. Two biggest concerns were cost of building public streets as currently provided in our subdivision regulations. And take, for example, if a developer comes in to create a 4-lot subdivision and he has to build our public, he must construct whatever access way to our public street standards, he cannot make a return on investment. The number of lots is creating are too few, and the standards that we have will require a lot of money to construct that those 4 lots will not be able to pay for that investment. So that can become a discouragement for development in the city, especially when we're also trying to encourage infill development on some of the properties that we've got. Then we've got design standards issues. The developers, the engineers that they hire to design this site, they need very clarity in our code on what specific standards they have to design to. Right now, we've got the ones for public streets. We don't have anything for private drives. So we've kind of been having this adaptation, kind of make it up as you go, you know, and that poses a problem with consistency. The citizens have their own concerns. First is disclosure, you know. They buy these properties, they don't know what they're buying. It's not, nobody's fully telling them that you'll be responsible for this. You take the master deed of some of this subdivision is over 150, some is 200 pages. How many people read 200 pages when they're trying to buy a house? So how can we encourage greater transparency, kind of buyer be aware situation? Maintenance responsibilities, they buy these and then they realize they have to take care of it. It's deteriorating very fast because there were really no standards to provide for durability. And that's usually what pushes them to come to the city and say, hey, city, can you take over these streets, this private access ways for maintenance? So they've got that issue. And then you have situations where homeowner associations collapse. They become non-existent. What happened? This was initially designed and put in place to be maintained by the homeowner association. That homeowner association is now non-existent. So what happens? The access way cracks up, you start having potholes here and there, and that creates blight for the neighborhood as a whole. It's not just something that affects that particular subdivision, but the neighborhood as a whole starts looking old, dilapidated, starts looking blighted. So that's a concern from the level of citizens. Emergency responders, as I mentioned, the big issue is wayfinding. Because of this wayfinding concern, E911 from the Fed adopted basically the regulation that if you have 3 or more lots on a private drive, it must have a name. If you don't name it, they are not going to give you any address for those properties because of wayfinding issues. Good example is what happened on Pontiana Place. You know, it's got access, the lots have got access on Willows Springs Drive and on Greenwood Drive, but then access comes in through Pontiana Place and somebody was sick in there, dying in there, and they got there and they couldn't find where is this Pontiana Place. So wayfinding is a very important element for emergency responders. Then lastly, you have the public authority, the city. City is concerned about maintenance liability. If we take over these private access ways that were not built to any sustainable standard, then the very next month, we'll have to be spending taxpayers' money, spending public money to be maintaining something that the developer would have built to a more durable standard upfront, and he didn't. Our regulations as currently written lack clarity. You know, there is confusion in certain areas, and it's important that we provide that clarity. And then lastly, regulations as currently written use ownership and development types as criteria for whatever construction standard that you need to have. Now, ownership always changes. It always changes. If you say, I give you an example of what we currently have in the code. It says, if you're building for rental, you're free to do it as a driveway. If you're building it for ownership, then you have to build a public street standard, for example. Well, you have condominiums that buildings in the city or developments in the city today that were built as condos that are now basically being rented. So that is not a very stable, sustainable way of addressing this particular issue. Instead of dealing with matters of ownership and development types, it's important we rather focus on the standards for those driveways or access ways. What have we done in the code to solve each of these, or in the proposals to address each of these concerns? On the element of cost for developers, we have created a scale system that a developer can have a return on investment. For example, if you take the case of Knoxville, Knoxville has the provision, if you're doing 6 lots or 6 dwelling units or more, you must build it to a public street. So when we wrote the ones for Johnson City, part of the reason it has taken us this time is let's test these regulations. You know, have developers come in as I work with them on different development projects. I ask myself the question, if we had these regulations already in place, how would they have impacted this particular project that is in front of us? Would it have been a development killer, or would it allow that development to go ahead? And we had 2 developments, for example, that I can remember at the top of my head. We approved one out there on cottages at Cedar Rock Phase 3 that has got Bringsley Way going in. When that project, for example, was initially proposed, the access was going to be through a private drive system. It had 8 units or 8 lots were proposed. And we said, no, you have to build this to public street standard of a lane. That would have killed that project. The developer went back and said, look, so I'm going to be open to all of you. If I can get 10 lots in here, I'll build a public street. I'll make the return. But less than that, I can't. The numbers just won't work. Went back, did all kinds of calculations, came back, and the numbers really were not working with the market. We had the second situation out there on you get on University Parkway, the rezoning.
Greenwood?
Is it Green? Cherokee Road, thank you. The C's, it's Christian Cherokee, the C's in my head. Brook Hollow, right there at that intersection with Brook Hollow. That was another case that we had. And it came up to the same number. It's as if these 2 developers were talking together. It came to the same thing. If I can get 10 units in here, that was a PUD scenario, these numbers are not going to work. I can't do this development. So those were 2 scenarios that kind of told us what the market, in terms of cost, is going to work. And then Design standards for developer, for design engineers or surveyors that have to work with this was necessary. We provide clarity in the code on each of these standards. If you're building a private street, it has to meet public street standards. That's what we currently have in the subregs. Nothing changes. If you're building a private street, it meets public street standards. It's the same as a public street. The only difference there is you've decided to own it. Maybe put a gate on it, you know. So nothing changes on private street. Private drives did not have any standards. We have now provided standards for that. Shared access easements do not have any standards. Those are basically like driveways that are being shared by multiple properties. Cross-access easements, those are also basically like driveways, one property being accessed through some other person's property. You know, both properties have got public street frontage, but maybe because of topographic issues, which are very common, we live in an area that is mountainous, you've got topographic issues. You also have line of sight, sight distance issues, and sometimes they have to share a driveway. We've provided those standards. Shared access easements, cross-access easements, basically those meet driveway standards. Second element we had to address, have provisions in the proposed language for citizens' concern, disclosure. How do we handle that? Right now, we don't have anything in the subregs that encourage or create a situation where you can have a buyer beware. We don't have anything. You just have a subdivision plat, it gets approved, it's a recorded, case closed. Few people, even in acquiring property, actually go pull up a subdivision plat and read all the notes that are put on that subdivision plat. Most just drive around, see the property, engage a real estate agent, and move forward. So we've proposed signage, and the way it's framed is, if you propose a private drive, for example, and you bring the final subdivision plat before the planning commission for approval, planning commission approves that plat. After the planning commission approves it, the secretary of the planning commission has to sign on that plat before it's recorded. The same way we deal with bonds. If planning commission approves a plat subject to maybe posting a $20,000 bond, you have to post that bond before the secretary of the planning commission will sign on that plat for recording. So this signage is going to work the same way we have for public streets. When we approve plats with public streets on them, the developer goes to Public Works, pays for those signs. Public Works goes to that property and puts up the street signs. So the private drive name sign, which will have a yellow blue background, and let me just call my attention to that. Not that the sign is blue, but that the background is blue. The letters are white, and then you have no public maintenance yellow sign that has to be there on that property. You pay for those signs to the Public Works Department. The city will put up those signs before the secretary of the Planning Commission even signs on them for recording. And under state law, a developer is not supposed to sell lots until that plat is recorded and the developer has a copy. So by the time you start selling lots, anybody goes out there, you will see that this is a private drive. There is no public maintenance provided. In terms of maintenance responsibility, the collapse of HOA or neighborhood blight, to solve that, we've now provided a standard in the subregs. Two main things about this standard. One, the pavement schedule, that's basically the thickness. How thick is this road? Is the same as for a lane, a public street lane. So the durability is going to be the same. That's significantly, if a public street takes 30 years to crack up, that's the same thing that's going to happen here. The developer will be able to build sidewalk on one side of the street, you grade the other side, you have a 10-feet area on the other side of the street that will have to be graded. It doesn't have a sidewalk on it, it just have to be graded. We're borrowing the same thing that we currently have in the zoning ordinance. If a developer comes to the city now and proposes to a commercial development or a resident multifamily apartment, and you don't have sidewalks, let's say 1,000 feet to that property, you are required to pay a fee in lieu of sidewalk construction, but you have to grade the area for future construction of sidewalk. So these significantly reduce the cost for the homeowner association if they come up tomorrow and ask the city to take this over. All that we just need to do is to go in that area already graded and lay a 5-feet sidewalk, case closed, and it will meet city standards. We'll take it over.
We still require the gutters.
Yes, everything is the same. Curb and gutter, everything the same. Last, we've got the emergency responders, wayfinding. That's a key element that they have. Private streets shall be named. They are just like public street. The only difference, the developer has decided to keep it private, maybe build a gate for a gated community. So you have to name them. Private drives providing access to more than 3 parcels shall be named. That ties in with what the feds currently have, 911 currently has. So they shall be named. Shared permanent access easements shall not be named. They are just driveways. And cross-access easements, they shall not be named. They are just driveways between 2 or 3 properties. They're just driveways like a driveway to a single-family residential home, just that they're being shared by 2 people. You don't have to name those ones. Naming it has the risk of people start looking at it as a street when it's not a street. So that's what we're trying to ensure here. That is what, in summary, we have got in the regulations in front of you.
Read in there. A lot of writing, a lot of work.
Any comments, any feedback?
So you're looking for us to review these regs and get you comments between now and next meeting?
Just vote on it tonight.
Man, he's like, I already beat him down, man.
Well, you cannot vote on it tonight because there must be a public hearing on it, which is scheduled for next month. So,
thank you, Eson.
Been involved in some of the subcommittee meetings. You guys put a lot of work into this. And
There's a lot of work.
I really like how we found a middle ground between what the developers want and what we need for the city. And so I think you guys have done an excellent job on this.
I think you should label it the Poinciana Place Amendment.
we will have that on it.
If there's no further questions, need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We adjourn.
Thank you, Song.
Hey, Son, come here, show me this. All right, so